Hi, my name's Kevin Hoffman. I was born in New Ulm. Even at that time, there were still old-timers who spoke German in New Ulm. Many old-timers liked to come into my dad's furniture store and talk German to my grandfather and my dad. My dad had been in World War II in the Army Air Corps, and he spoke pretty good German, but his German had become corrupted over the years because of English creeping into the language that he spoke. So after the war, he was in the MPs, and he was the translator between the local German people and the US Army occupiers. So the German ladies came up with a special name for my dad. They called him das Deutschverderber, which means the one who corrupts the German language. When I grew up, there were many reminders in New Ulm of the Sioux Uprising. There's the Warju distillery with which the Sioux burned down. There's the Center Street Monument. There's the murals in the middle school that John Susha painted. And there were still bullet holes in the back of some of the buildings in downtown. And of course, there's Berg's Battery, which was a militia established to defend the town against any future attacks by the Indians. My favorite was the Brown County Museum in the basement of the library. I spent many hours down there looking at the exhibits, many of which were relics from the Sioux Uprising. My mom, in her later years, told me, "Kevin, I don't know if I should tell you this, but your first grade teacher told me that you would never amount to anything." Well, I didn't know it. I wasn't supposed to amount to anything, so I worked hard, I studied hard, I earned a small scholarship, and I worked nights, and I put myself through college. I earned a Bachelor's of Science degree from Mankato State in math and computer science. And then later, I earned my master's degree from the College of St. Thomas. After I graduated, I got a job with Sperry Univac. They had a contract to install the combat information system on some destroyers that were being built down in Mississippi. An interesting anecdote is, while I was down there, sometimes I had to tell people who I worked for. And I would say Sperry Univac. And they would say, "Oh, you sell vacuum cleaners." Well, that wasn't the case at all. We were doing high-tech computers, but that was all they knew about Sperry Univac. While I was down there, I rode the sea trials when they were testing the computers and the software in the ships prior to delivery to the Navy. And I acted like Dr. Spock. When they needed the software to do something different, I would reprogram it for them, and then they could test the parts of the system that they wanted to test. Or in some cases, it saved them some time so that they did not have to have aircraft come back for so many sorties for doing radar alignments. So after I returned to Minnesota from Mississippi, I worked on a contract up in Montreal for several years. And when I came back, I remembered the book that Mrs. Ida Hermerding had given me, and I dug into the translation. And I found out that it was a very fascinating story. It was fiction, but historical fiction. The two main characters were fictional, but all the events woven around the story were actual historical events, which I verified through independent sources. The original book that I got from Mrs. Ida Hermerding was published in 1914 by Dr. Frederick P. Meyer. It reflects the thinking and attitudes of the time when it was written. I did not try to make it politically correct. I only translated what he had written. The story is set during the Sioux Uprising. It's a love story between two fictional characters, but they are set in true historical events. The story is nicely woven together like three classic love stories that everyone is familiar with. I will cite Romeo and Juliet, and the parallel there is that Walter thought his beloved Elsie had been killed during the Battle of New Ulm. I will cite the Gone with the Wind scene where Atlanta was burned. And in parallel to that, New Ulm was burned to the ground by the Indians during the battle. And the last classic love story is Farewell to Arms, the parallel there being the hospital scenes. This book had all kinds of fascinating things about the times it was written, and the Sioux language today is not very well known by many people, but this book does incorporate several Sioux expressions and Sioux words into it, and I thought that was very interesting. Some of the words it used were Pakachi, which in Sioux meant flee, and Nipo, which means kill. Trial and Triumph is an enjoyable way for people to be exposed to some very little known history. The story is full of suspense, it's thrilling, it's romantic. It's about one of the most intense battles fought during the Sioux Uprising at New Ulm. Everyone has heard of General Custer and the Battle of Little Bighorn. What people don't always know is that the Sioux Wars, which culminated in that battle, started with the Sioux Uprising in Minnesota. General Custer lost his entire command of over 225 men in that battle. The Sioux Uprising in Minnesota cost the lives of over 800 settlers. When I originally read New Ulm, I found it to be a very fascinating and gripping story, and I wanted to make this story available to people in English. If you'd like to purchase Trial and Triumph, it's for sale on my website, kevinhoffmanbook.com. It's also available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Litfire Publishing. I'm having a book signing in New Ulm at the Public Library on April 23rd at 6:30. I'd love to see you all there.